Welcome to Project Chatter, the podcast where PPM experts from various sectors talk about the latest trends. Listen to Val and Dale as they talk about tried and tested best practices and share their unfiltered thoughts about the industry. Whether you're here to learn how to progress your career, improve your project control skills, or just want to hear an Aussie and South African rant about projects, then you've come to the right place. Welcome to the Project Chatter podcast with your hosts, Dale Fung and Val Matthews.
In this week's pod, we spoke to Professor Eddie Obeng, a good friend, and we've had him on before. Great guy. We ran out of time, actually, but he's never stayed in his lane, and neither did we, so this is a great podcast for that. He's traveled many at once, world-class speaker, educator, and author of 10 books. His work ranges from leadership to business acumen, all grounded in his New World framework, first shared in a popular TED Talk, and he is also a bestseller, All Change, written as an adventure story on how to make projects work, helps move project management from a niche specialism into the mainstream.
A digital pioneer, Eddie founded Pentacle, the world's first virtual business school, and created Cube, described by the Wall Street Journal as the most human-centered virtual campus for teaching global executives. His models and frameworks are now used from UK government innovation funding to global design education. And yes, when he's not advising leaders or writing books, Eddie sometimes flies his own helicopter to work. So he wasn't joking with you, Val, when he does have his own chopper headset, unlike you.
He's crazy enough to fly a chopper. That's good.
Yeah, but Eddie's fantastic. We've had him on before, as you say. He's a colorful character, but he's also deeply knowledgeable and experienced and has a unique perspective that I think certainly will get the listeners really asking those curious questions on why we actually do what we do. Was there any sort of thing that particularly stood out for you?
Yeah, look, I mean, Eddie has a great wealth of background and knowledge and wisdom, and it's good to come at AI with different perspectives. And he reminds me of the humanistic type, he's thinking about the benefit for people and not to get too caught up in the hype of AI, and talks about persuasion and various other elements around government. But then in the same instance, I think Eddie also has a fascination with technology, which is clear. And so he's already applying it and utilizing it. But I think most people are in the same position. They're not sure where they use AI, but they are dabbling, and he goes into some detail of how he's using it, which is great.
Yeah, no, he's fantastic. Look, we're not going to spoil it too much. We do also have some exciting news, because on this episode we are launching the All Change Project Chatter edition of Eddie's book, and you can go ahead and grab a copy of that. There is a link in the show notes. And yeah, it's a steal, because Eddie, sort of combines all of his knowledge into this book, and it is a bestseller. So please go ahead, get a copy for yourself. Proceeds we will give to charity as well. So please do go and grab a book. With that, we'll leave you there. As we say, keep listening, keep liking, and keep paying it forward.
Hello, project people. Welcome back to your favorite podcast. This is Val Matthews. Hope you're having fun. And Dale, it's great to see you, my friend. How you been?
Oh, I've been good, thank you. Readying myself for the British winter. I'm sure things are heating up on your side, but it doesn't look like it. You in your hoodie there. You still got your pilot's headset on. So yeah.
Maybe after this podcast, I'll heat up, depending on the topic. But let's bring in our guest, which we haven't seen. Well, I haven't seen for a good couple of years, but it's always good to see you, Eddie. How are you, Eddie Obeng?
Very good indeed, Val. Brilliant.
Very, very good. And look, yeah, I think this is a good subject matter. Eddie and I and Dale were just talking offline, and we'll probably give the crowd what they want, I think, Eddie. But look, I actually think I'd love to start with a definition of, because you've been around and you are in the tech in a great way. And you're a bit of a pioneer in your space as well. And I remember our last conversation, because it was one of my favorite podcasts, actually.
Thank you.
What do you think of the AI swell? If I just get let's start at the newsflash media swell kind of sound clip section, Eddie. But what do you think of the whole AI coming to save us, or is AI coming to destroy us?
Yeah, and it's a great one. Everyone's excited about it. Everyone thinks that's where they're going to make their money. At the same time, they're terrifying everyone by saying it's going to take your job. I mean, there's every single aspect. The amounts of money which are invested in AI are phenomenal. I mean, if you just buy one single NVIDIA chip, a card, I mean, it'll be thousands. That's just one. And they buy hundreds of thousands of them. The game is people are spending money as if it's going out of fashion. So it could be the next gold rush. This could be it, El Dorado. Okay. Now, I was taught that whenever there's a gold rush, don't go in for the gold rush, sell the shovels. Because the person selling the shovels always gets rich, but most of the people chasing after the gold don't. So I have a view about it, but we'll sort of work our way towards it. I mean, it's also quite interesting because it's there's something called the Gartner hype curve. I don't know if you come across it. Well, Gartner explained how things start off. Everyone gets really excited, and then nothing comes, and it goes into gloom and misery, and then sometimes it emerges with one or two useful outcomes. Okay. And AI, I think, is on that curve, and it's at the peak. Everyone's excited about it. And usually after that comes the miserable bit. So that's the other thought I've got. And then the third thought which I've got is when I was a student and we were doing engineering, we used to code and we used to build things with machine learning, and we used to do it on old-fashioned compute CPUs. And you'd write your little code, and it would take you about a month to just do one iteration. Of course, AI with the graphics chips goes much, much faster, thousands and thousands of times faster. So is it just a solution looking for a problem? I have no idea. But Val, I'm sure you're going to tell me exactly how it's going to transform our lives and make the future better.
I don't know how I ended up on the evangelist side of AI, but I'm still as critical as you, Eddie. And the reason why is I say, like, I don't really know what's in the package. When people say AI, I actually have to ask them what they mean, because I've dabbled with code and programs and software, and as it's kind of developed, the only thing that's really changed, maybe, other than large language models, is the fact that everyone seems to want it. I mean, there is this bit, like, as you said, I think a perfect analogy is the gold rush era, where everyone's just, they got a taste of this thing and this promise, that things will be better once they have it. But I've yet to see most people grasp the concept of AI. And the harder part is, back to your point around finding a solution, or finding a problem for the solution, I find a lot of businesses want to use it, but then they're like, so Val, so how do I put it into my company? It's like, well, if you don't know, then don't use it. You don't need it to run an effective business yet. But there is this constant narrative, I think, out there, particularly on social media, perhaps, that says you have to. And I think there's a fear of being left behind, something like a fear of missing out type thing for companies. And if you're a private company, you're thinking about competition. And just speaking to some of these private companies, Dale and Eddie, they think it's a competitive disadvantage not to have AI. But then when they go to implement it, and I think Gartner had some stats out there about the number of implementations of AI that actually fail if they do it themselves. Then they go out and spend a fortune, in fact, a large percentage of their profit or revenue to implement something they don't know how to use on a problem they're not sure they really have. I don't know. I'm trying to Dale, actually. Is that your experience, Dale, as well? Because you work in a little bit in this space too, mate.
Yeah, I mean, we do a lot in this space in terms of exploring the art of the possible, but it's always met with caution, right? What is the actual thing that needs solving? What is the problem first before creating the solution? And I think I spoke to Eddie a couple of weeks ago offline. Eddie, do you remember this conversation? We spoke about the human element when it comes to people and emotion. And I think people potentially overlook the fact that any technology, not just AI, isn't at a place where we have this sort of human intuition on how others might be feeling or reading the room, so to speak. I was chatting on the Gen AI podcast. We actually spoke about you, Val, Elle and I. And I was saying, if I'm working with a with a client, and apologies to those that have listened to the Gen AI podcast episode. And I mentioned this, but I think it's really relative to this. I said, if I'm working with a client and they've got a PMO set up, let's say, and they come in and they go, look, I've got this thing called Primavera P6. I don't understand what it is. I think it's a scheduling tool, but only the planners use it. No one else uses it. It's not integrated with my costs and everything else, right? Something really specific for our audience to grasp. And you ask AI, how do I get the best out of my tool? Because I'm paying for this license. Now, if you ask it in that way, phrased like that, you'll go, this is how you get the best out of the tool. But for me, looking at it, I'm answering the unanswered question is actually stop using it. You're paying for a license and you're not getting the benefit out of it. Switch your licenses off and don't use it. But AI won't give you that answer because it's answering within the confines. There's limitations to it. So Eddie, please go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a perfect example. I mean, fundamentally, if people don't know how it works, then they think it's a human being thinking. That's the first mistake people make. It's not. It's just a bunch of calculations. It doesn't know anything. That's why it hallucinates. When it draws hands, sometimes it'll add an extra hand or it'll miss off a knee and things like that. It makes stuff up. That's routine. That's part of and built into the machinery. Okay, it's never going to be fixed with however many layers you put on. If you say to AI, I don't know, give me some ideas for how I might use Primavera, it comes up with ideas. If it says any sources or companies who might use this, it'll make stuff up because it doesn't know the difference between a factual question and a creative question, even despite all the work they've done on the context setting. So the tool you're using isn't a human being. Okay, human beings do get things wrong and make stuff up. Okay, I accept that. But it's not what people imagine it is. The second thing is, Val, going back to your point where you said everyone seems to want it. Can I just do a little explanation of the nightmare we're in and the reason I want us to fast forward to the past? Because that will start to explain what's happening here. So what happens? People used to live in little villages, little tribes, okay? And they would just spend all their time growing their crops and life was grim. Then they figured out how to do a little bit better, catching some more. And then they could build bigger groups, which meant some people could work on catching the wildebeest and others could grow the crops. And then they could trade. Basically, trade is a service process. Well, one person provides something, other person takes that thing, and it works. People always imagine things have prices. They don't. You know, if you go to buy, I don't know, a pen, okay, it says it's 10 quid. I've got a pen. You've got 10 quid. Look at your 10 quid. You go, I don't want my 10 quid. I prefer a pen. I look at the pen. I go, I don't want the pen. I want 10 quid. So which of us is correct? Because if we're both correct, then let's just hold on to what we've got. You know, so the process is, people swap, they serve each other. And once you start this service thing, you then have the possibility of building a civilization. Okay. And if on that civilization you impose something else, which is an upside down T, I'm probably going too fast. The structure of civilization is a T upside down. It must have a superordinate goal. What is it we're trying to do? What is it we all believe in? Then what do we all do to make sure that happens? Then what other things do we have to do to facilitate that? And then the bottom line is, how are we going to work together? How are we going to make sure you don't rip each other up? How are we going to make sure we don't go to war? So if you start trading, you agree things like, I believe that you have property on that vertical. If you don't believe that, then you grow your stuff and I just come and stab you and steal it all. Okay. So we basically built an entire civilization on service on an upside down T. That upside down T is the same shape as the way the Ten Commandments are laid out, the way the Bill of Rights is laid out, the way that the Magna Carta is laid out. It's exactly the same formula running through hundreds of thousands of years probably, okay? If you want people to get on and do stuff together. Then it morphed into basically market-driven economies. Because a market-driven economy, you guys make a podcast, someone else listens to it. You serve them, they listen to you. Fantastic, we all serve each other. Okay. So that means good stuff happens when you do stuff for which people want. And we grew and we all got rich and we came out of poverty. And then all of a sudden people started going, maybe we can come up with ideas where we don't have to worry about customers. In fact, maybe what we could do is we can have investors who will give us so much money, we'll build the whole of, I don't know, Google, and then we'll have one Google and we'll dominate the world and see what happens. So we moved into monopolies and so on. And when we moved into that, because you're no longer serving people, you have to persuade them. And in the 70s, persuasion science took off. There's a chap called Robert Cialdini. Everyone should read him, okay? There's a chap who's a cartoonist called Scott Adams who has a book on persuasion. Everyone should read that. Because once you understand it, you understand that everybody may think they want it, but they don't necessarily want it. And Val, you mentioned fear. I have a persuasion map. I think it's cube.cc/persuasion. And it's a map of all the ways of persuading people. And one of the top ones is called fear. Very few things beat fear. And if you frighten people, they'll be left out or they just act. Their brain is, and they just act. Okay, why is this important? Because we have learned how to do that particular thing many times. My own personal example is I run Cube, which is a virtual reality campus. I started building in 2009, live in 2012. I've been sort of building this thing with bits. I've got customers who love us. We work very differently. We have avatars which don't look like people. Everyone goes, why are they like that? We say it's because it's not a game. But we built our little niche. And then about 3 or 4 years ago, Mark Zuckerberg decided to do the I'm not serving customers bit, I'm just going to go global. And he invented this thing called a metaverse. He even changed the name of his company. And we were all supposed to be metaversing. Everyone who came anywhere near Cube would say, where's your headset? We don't have headsets because we know 8% of people, when you put the 3D headset on, they throw up. So you can't build this into an enterprise with people throwing up over their keyboards. It's not a good plan. But everyone just listened to the hype, and we got just slapped around the face. $13.8 billion later, they threw the whole thing in the bin. It's less money than has been spent on AI, but that's what happens when you move away from a model of service and the upside down T. They tried it also politically. You might have heard about things like Pol Pot, where he decided year zero, and this is how we're going to do it. And then everybody, basically, you keep going until everyone becomes a cannibal, and then it stops, okay? So this model of not making human beings and customers, consumers, and their needs paramount, and then following through with technology to support them, as Dale was saying, what is the need? How do we support it? It just is a bad idea anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. I love these analogies. I think as well the challenge is balancing the concept of AI with actually productive tasks. And if you broke it down into components, there's a few different things. And I was in a bit of a think tank last week with some AI tech people in Australia, and we were debating this very, very conversation around AI sovereignty. But we were trying to find how a framework would be all encompassing. But by doing that, we had to reduce AI down to what exactly components are we talking about? What parts of AI? Are we talking about chat bots and LLMs? Are we talking about physical AI in terms of the robotics? Are we talking about something else? Most companies, I think, would agree what they want is some form of either integration or automation or a combination. And the other challenge, I think if you're looking for problem statements that they could solve, is acting on behalf of the company. Could they create a memory of their knowledge bank? Could they say some type of facility that retrieves and recalls information that's important to them or their employees or their clients? There is a real difference, I think, though. I'd love to get into this, Eddie, with you on this. And I totally agree with you with the persuasion thing. I think we've all seen this big swell. I mean, it's the same kind of tactics that the government uses around renewable energies, actually.
Yes, correct. I mean, Rick Cialdini, I have one of my people engagement tools, my performance engagement
on my
tool,
list.
helps you spot them. So when you see a sentence, you go, it's one of those. It's one of those. But yeah, exactly the same techniques. There's no difference because there's no customer pull. No one's waking up in the morning and going, you wake up in the morning and go, oh, if only my duvet was warmer, because you're in Australia, it's cold, okay? Then somebody comes up with a duvet with an extra layer. No. Somebody's just basically saying, you're going to have a plank instead of a duvet. Planks are good for you. They're going to save the world. So it's that persuasion thing rather than actually even marketing. It's not need-driven at all. But just building on your point about, how do you break the components down? In my very humble opinion, that's the wrong end of the telescope. Just going back to what Dale says, there are technologies all over the place. This pen I'm messing around with is a technology. So if you look at the evolution of tools, okay, we started off by making things which allowed us to do a little bit more. They fitted our body, like, when you're using a trowel, it fits your hand. Then somebody came up with the idea of basically a machine. They'll get the water to turn it, and it didn't have to fit our hands, but it sort of worked. And then we worked our way through that, and then we ended up with, okay, maybe now it's something which can talk and do other stuff. So our technologies have got more sophisticated. And whenever you come up with a technology, you have 4 choices, whether it's a mill, which is going to grind stuff, or whether it's a locomotive, whatever. Okay, 4 choices. Number 1, does it do differently what you're currently doing, or does it do something which is currently impossible? In other words, does it do faster, quicker, whatever it is, cheaper, or does it do something which is impossible? On the other axis is, does it actually allow human beings to flourish and get more degrees of freedom, or does it squeeze us and give us less degrees of freedom? And that's basically, it's called digital destiny. And it's basically how technologies work. So if it's going to allow you to do your job a little bit better, it's enhancing you. Okay, that is more degrees of freedom, something different. If it's going to let you do things which are impossible, it's empowering you, but it's making your life freer, happy, etc. That's where your technologies, if you're a good person, you want to focus them. But people sometimes don't care about that because they're trying to make money. So there are 2 in the bottom. And one of them is enslave. Is it going to reduce what people can do so that you can control them, so that they sit there, sort of each person at the factory making a little twist of the wire, and they don't get up until the Amazon thing goes beep, etc. That's enslaving them. And then the other one, which is what you describe, where you're saying integrate and all these lovely words, which is basically eliminate all the people, get rid of them, we hate them. Okay? And so you can use technology in any of those 4 ways. They're all okay. My preference is the top 2. And once you've decided strategically what you're going to do, then you look for your technology. Don't do it the other way around.
Well, here's the challenge, right? I think we've seen in the news, Dale, and I'll get you in on this conversation. That's exactly what the big banks are doing. That's exactly what they're doing with, I'd say, the transactional elements of customer service. And they're displacing a number of people, and particularly because a lot of this stuff is offshore, it's not affecting those countries. It's affecting those countries that supported that, India, Philippines, etc. And obviously there is natural jobs that are being removed. I just want to make a clarity for listeners, because this is a really good discussion, Eddie, and I love your points of view, because there is a difference between a tool servicing a problem and a tool taking your job. And I think there is some differential that we have to just there's an appreciation step to this, because it is quite different. I'm sure, Eddie, you were around with the .com bubble, and
oh, yeah.
I remember the old days when the internet came out, and I was like, what is this thing, and it was given the same promise. It was going to free us from our lives and give us more freedom, and it never did what it said on the box. It never gave us additional flexibility. I mean, it gave us flexibility but not freedom.
Yes.
But we're in the same predicament where we're given all these promises, at least on the box, that AI will save problems, it'll assist the elderly, it'll do our shopping, it'll cook for us at home. Yeah. The challenge with that is, I actually do think there's a double problem with this, is if it services all our problems, and humanity has a problem of like, what is our purpose, which is a bigger problem. But then I also think that we haven't quite found where AI sits in the world yet, and we're testing it. And I would say it's less about servicing a transactional job for me personally. I would say AI is more about being creative at this point. It's like Play-Doh. There's a sand pit. Yeah, yeah. What do you think on that, Andy? Yeah.
The thing is, this is not the entrepreneurial, market-driven capitalist model which made us rich. We shouldn't be taking a technology and then the whole world trying to figure out how to make it work. They've done this with everything. I remember SAP. I mean, every single technology which comes out, they try and force it on you, and then you have to figure out how you make it work for you. And that's why you get the waste. But in the end, they're selling you the shovels. You're the one looking for the gold. They're going to make the money, and you might not get your gold. You might lose your job. So it's actually quite a dangerous model overall, if you don't understand what's going on, because you get caught up in the hype. I mean, so in my world, I have what I call different types of projects. Some where you have a goal and the method, I call it paint by numbers. Somewhere you have a goal, no method, I call that quest. And if you read my books and stuff, all change and things, you'll find them in there. This is what I call a movie project. It's like you've got the camera, you got to make the movie, you have no script. Solution, looking for a problem. And if you can do it at a global scale, so people can't go anywhere else, they have no choice, then they're forced to go down and then do the gold digging, else you actually take a lot of money out of their pockets. If you were serious about, if we were really serious and it was customer led, and I was running a company, I was CEO, I'd go, well, which employee could I replace with the least risk and the best return? So, self-driving cars, they have 5 systems. They have like long range, then they have LiDAR, then they have radar, then they have vision, etc., and then microwaves. So they've got 5 systems to sense where they're going so they can check whether the decisions they're making are right. If you take a CEO's job, they're doing exactly the same 5 things. Long-term vision, what's happening to the site. It's exactly the same 5 things. So if you wanted to get the best bang for your buck, you would use AI and maybe a bit of robotics to replace the CEO. You would make oodles of millions, okay? No disruption to the company. In fact, if you put a robot in many cases, the staff would get better leadership. So it's not an economic decision. We're just now rolling with something we've been told is exciting and we don't want to get left behind. And this is part of our headache. Interrupt me because I don't breathe. You know this, okay? So if I ask most people, I say, are you happy with how, you're old now, you're probably, 30, 20, 40. You've seen the bits of the world. Are you happy with the general trajectory of the world? Is it going in the right direction? Most people go, no. I say, yeah, tell me. They say, oh, things are getting more expensive, harder to do. There are more restrictions, more hoops to climb through. Everything they describe about the future is grim. My job's going to get taken by AI. They're in this move, which is not customer driven, which is not service driven, which doesn't have the upside down T of we understand what's important and we know how to work together. And they can feel this thing sucking their soul. Okay. So I say to them, so why are you still going in this direction? Why are you still talking about the talking points on the news? It's not helping. I mean, it's quite obvious. I'm old. When I was young, like you, as you said, they said the internet would make our lives better. They used to say we'd work for 2 days a week. They used to say we had to pay taxes so that people wouldn't have to sleep on the streets. I mean, they told us all sorts of wonderful things. Medicine will make some people being ill. I'm old now. People are iller than ever. We're working like dogs. We get less money and time to play. We can't even go off on a Friday and have a pint at the end of the week. Everything is steadily going downhill. And yet, we've introduced more and more technology and productivity and so on. So if we become so productive, we've got so effective that our lives are getting worse and worse and worse. Go figure. So in other words, all the decisions we've made, once you track away from the individual, human, autonomous, service-driven, entrepreneurial, market-led model, they just impoverish you. They impoverish your soul and everything else. And that's why, for me, I would say we need to dream a better future, not get caught up in this gold rush. I would say, you've heard of Homer Simpson? Homer Simpson? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Bart, eat my shots and all that. Okay. So Homer Simpson, do you know what he did for a living in the cartoon? Which is a realistic cartoon. What was his job?
He went
Do you
to the
remember?
factory.
He went to the factory as an operator on a shift system. Blah, blah. Then he gets in the car and drives home. He's just a shift operator, okay? How many kids can he afford?
3. Well, maybe he can only afford 1, but he's got 3.
He's got 3. They don't look thin. I mean, Bart's not skinny. Okay. Does he have a house?
He's got a house. He's
Does
got
he
a
have a
wife,
lawn?
3 kids. Got a dog and a cat,
He
I
can
think.
afford a dog and a cat. 1950s, that's how people were living. 25, something's broken. I'm not saying we have to return to the ways, the details, but the ethos, the value set, what made them connected, how they worked together, where they got their goods from. We've globalized, food should have got cheaper, got more expensive. How did that happen? So almost everything which you read around you from all the commentators and normal people is standing on its head. None of it makes any sense. Once you actually use common sense, it's just gibberish. But there's so much good persuasion, you can't get out of it. And you've got to really start to dream a better dream. And that's why I talk about fast forward to the past.
Yeah. Eddie, if I jump in there, it is perhaps one of the reasons we find ourselves in this chaotic world that we are now in, and which is probably made a little bit more anxious by, the what ifs and what could be with AI, is one of the reasons for that chaos, I guess, the fact that leaders are getting away with taking shortcuts and there's no consequences, but also perhaps that we have so much choice these days and we're striving for more choice. But actually, because of the vast amounts of options we have, we actually aren't really going in any specific direction. Where you have a simpler life, limited choices, you actually have more freedom in a weird sense. Because when you're chatting there with Val and you're talking about all these things that AI could perhaps do, could perhaps solve the different types of use cases there might be for AI, not just in the project world, but in general, you have to ask yourself why. Like, why do we want it to do that? Right? Like Simon Sinek says, start with why.
Yeah,
And I think in many cases, the why isn't defined. We're just making stuff.
correct.
And that's great. And it feels like in that instance, then the way you put it, Val, is that the world is a petri dish at the moment, perhaps, and we're just exploring, and that creates chaos. And humans need routine, I feel. Not everyone can live in chaos. Some can, but not everyone's built that way. So I just wonder if that's leading to all the things we're seeing around mental health and lack of leadership and lack of direction and economies going all over the show, and just invest billions in data centers. And well, why is the value in the data center? Who gives it that value? Humans give it that value. Gold is just a mineral. It's just a shiny stone, yet we gave it value, right? So now we're giving this thing called AI value. So yeah, just a few of my thoughts there. And I wonder if
that's a nice summary. Yeah, I mean, there's a bigger political conversation which we probably shouldn't have here because it's 3 hours, okay? But you said the leaders aren't leading. So the word leadership is a very precise word. So I always have this joke where imagine that you're sitting in your room and somebody runs into your room wearing tattered clothing, does a funny dance, and then rushes out. And you go, what the hell was that? It just comes through the window and goes out. And you obviously think this is a crazy person who's just escaped from somewhere, okay? But if 10 seconds later, 15 other tattooed dressed men and women rush through your window and do the same thing, what does it tell you about the first one? It means that's the leader. Leaders exist because they have followers, okay? So that's what leadership is. It's a connection where basically the leader does a bunch of things, like they understand what to transmit. They transmit through their behavior, their emotions, their actions, and the way they express things. The followers receive vision or direction or inclusion or motivation or something else which makes them want to follow that person. That's how leadership works. It's a sort of a connected thing. We took the word leadership and the process of leadership and we applied it to jobs and called this job a senior leader. It's no such job. It's not a job. It's not a job thing, okay? Then we applied it to countries where we had maybe the politician or the king, and we call them leaders, and nobody was following them. Everyone hates them, okay? So just bear that in mind in the conversation, which is when you stop being precise with words, things get confusing. The second thing is the scale. We used to have these things called monopoly laws in the UK, where if you got too big, the government would chop you into bits, and they had them in many countries, okay? But they don't have any global monopoly laws. So the secret is, if you get globally big, nobody can take you on. When nobody can take you on, you don't have to concentrate on the customers or the consumers or the human beings. You can just AI and roll out the data centers. No one can stop you. So I had this model, it's called Evolve, Dominate, or Die, which are the 3 ways in which, read my book, New Rules for the New World, 3 ways in which the new world has evolved since the sort of 70s, 80s. You have 3 choices. You can evolve, which means let's invent our world so that we can live as well as Homer Simpson in different ways, using technology or not, whatever. You can die, wait for somebody to buy you up, or just give up and lose your job. Or you can dominate, get globally dominant, and then you're the biggest gorilla, no one can stop you. Governments, government, we have these oligarchs, they come into the UK, they have a lunch with Keir Starmer, and all of a sudden we get new policies. So that's how big they are, okay? So there are some other big things going on, but just coming back to the AI piece, just for a second. So let me explain how I'm using AI. 2 different stories, which will then make it clear that I'm not against it. We just have to exploit it. So first of all, if I have a question, okay, like today, somebody told me about their mum who has cellulitis and what's the best treatment and blah, blah, blah. And I had a friend the other day who's got dropped head syndrome where he can't keep his head up, what I do is I line up at least 2, maybe 3 or 4 different AIs, and I ask them all the same question. Why? Because I know they tell lies and they hallucinate. Okay. So it's like, if you want really, really good advice, you don't just ask one person, you ask 4 or 5 people. Okay. But because the AI looks omnipotent and it's so fast and so on, people think it's God and it has an answer. No, don't be fooled. Okay. So that's how I would use it. So with the guy with the dropped head, I discovered, for example, that one of the most common drivers of that is being on statins. So I asked him, are you on statins? He said, because the sheath around the nerves is cholesterol. Your brain's mostly cholesterol. So when you reduce your cholesterol, it shorts out, and then your neck muscles and different muscles start misbehaving. Okay. It's bizarre. Anyway, so I said, are you on statins? He said, yes. I said, why? He said, I don't know, but they just put me on them. So I said, well, go and check your cholesterol. If it's not high, just come off them. And that was about 6 weeks ago. And he's starting to be able to move his head again. So that was AI intervening in a not semi-medical way, just to solve a problem. But I had 3 or 4 AIs asking them what the probabilities could be and recognizing that AI will usually give you the answer in the middle of its training LLM curve. Well, it depends on the heat and stuff and the way they set up. So when you ask a question, you go, come on, Grok, that's rubbish. You can do better. Find me a study. Or ChatGPT, you keep saying that. I don't agree. So you bully it. And when you bully it, it finds the outliers, the real stuff. Because all the stuff in the middle is useless, because everybody knows that. So that's one way I use AI. I use it like a really sophisticated Google search. Okay. And it's helpful for that. And I'm not paying for it. So I know when you're not paying for a product, you are the product. So I'm very suspicious all the time. But the other thing was, I realized that I needed ways of bringing people together to work. This is why I built Cube. The reason for Cube was there are things which are normally easy for people to do when they're together, like sharing information, laughing, working together, working on projects, planning, and so on. There are things which are difficult to do, bringing people together so that they can actually all agree quickly and stuff. And there are things which are impossible. You've got a global team. How do you make them feel as one, and so on? So I built Cube to solve the difficult and impossible tasks. One of the things I realized was you needed human beings in there, because once you start solving these impossible tasks, it's a cultural thing, not a technical thing. The technical allows people to say, right, well, there are 12 of us in this virtual environment. Half of you are introverts, so no cameras. We're just going to use boxy avatars. So everyone's relaxed. Okay, great. And we want all the ideas, so everyone do like a huge snowstorm of stickies, so nobody gets embarrassed because they put theirs first up, and so on. So you start to build a culture around it. Okay, so that needs a person. And if there's a problem to be solved, I have a bag of tools. They're called PETs, people engagement tools, and everything from, how do you build a business case in 7 minutes, and Dale and Val, you've seen some of those things. Then all changed, my new edition. So the person would help them with that. But it meant that that person had to be a nice human being, was helpful, knowledgeable, and it's quite difficult. So I went, all my stuff is written down. I've got 10 books. I've got hundreds of articles. I mean, thousands of articles. I just bung them all in a box, put an AI on them, and I'll create an AI, which is like Eddie, and it's called EDDAI. So it's Eddie. So it's sort of like a Yorkshire version of Eddie. And, and so on Cube, when you're in the virtual world, you can ask it questions. And it behaves just like a normal AI. Ask it the same question twice, it'll give you 2 different answers. But it does roughly what I would do or proposes, and it even has my sense of humor. So those are 2 practical things, but I had a need first. And what I was trying to do was the empower and enhance, not the eliminate and enslave. But that's just me.
Now, they're good views, Eddie, and it's good to hear your application of AI, because I think a lot of people who are listening wouldn't even know, and they should definitely check out Q, but also how you would apply it in a real world scenario. But linking that to where we see the benefit, and I'm an optimistic anyway around everything. I tend to be more optimistic these days, because back to your point around just the census check of the world, a lot of people aren't happy with the way things are going. And I actually think, for those that are listening, it's the best time to be alive. There is so much opportunity, and value creation can come from just having a conversation with AI. If you're talking about chatbots, etc. If you want to, we've got a great connection, and we've done a few podcasts now with Lawrence Rowland, who
yes.
is a great experimenter, and he goes in there with complete with no expectations, and I think that's a really cool way to do it. And then just shares his views of what he did, how he did it, with no censoring. And I think that's fantastic. I do think there is a big leap between what we are capable of doing now and what AI could do. And there's a few industries I think there's definitely some movement. And I think health is one of those industries that's just been ripe for disruption for so long. Anyone who's been to a hospital knows how I'm not sure how the UK now, but Australia, it's chaos. It's organized chaos or controlled chaos, perhaps. And it's largely down to the reason it works is because of good people. Back to your point, Eddie, it doesn't work because they have good systems. It doesn't work because they have good processes. It doesn't work because we have great leaders in politics. It works because you have amazing leaders and doctors and people who always go above and beyond their job. But I have seen some news recently. There was an article published in the Natural Medicine magazine where they're now seeing AI do things above and beyond a doctor, and this is around detection, really, on stomach tumors for non-contrast CT imaging. They thought that it was almost impossible to find stomach cancer through this approach for gastric screening. But now AI through modeling, etc., and obviously there's an accuracy tolerance, I'm sure. They've been able to prove that they can do it, and so there is a direct causation between AI doing something that humans can't quite do now and saving lives. And I think that's phenomenal. That's absolutely phenomenal piece. I don't know, Eddie, if Dale, you want to?
No, that's a great one. But I mean, in the world of AI, where people can actually get, I was talking about the statins. Again, it's the wrong end of the telescope. The detection thing is important for the people who are ill today. But then the question has to be, how the hell did they get ill in the first place? Is this an illness which has been knocking around forever? There was a Secretary Kennedy today. They made some big announcement. And he said, well, the thing about autism is you don't see many 70-year-old severe autistic people, because everyone's saying, oh, it's the detection. It's the fact we're measuring it differently, blah, blah, blah. And he said, you don't see any of them. So if it had been around all the time, we would see 70-year-olds who are busy banging their heads and stuff. We don't see that. We've never seen that. So it's something else which is happening, something in the environment, something they're taking, something else. And in the same way, the stomach cancer, I don't know, has it always been here? Who knows? But for me, those are the deep questions. We go to the anchors, the roots. If all you do is just improve the detection rates, then maybe people even decide they're going to eat more junk food. Who knows? So it's this upside down T. What is the goal? What are our values? What's our purpose? We've lost that. And without that, you just flaffle around because there's no downside. But again, the other thing about something like the health service, and you're absolutely right, is the care, the human beings. What Dale was talking about is the human connection. They've broken it all. But when I was a kid, a nurse would give you a hug, which would cure you immediately. Okay. Now, of course, they're not allowed to do that for, I don't know why. Okay. But we're human beings. The thing about things like AI is it's trained on content since the 90s, everything which is digitized. But I don't know whether you have other halves or kids or whatever it is, but the emotions you feel towards them, the laughter you get, honestly, it's not been digitized. If they've watched all the Hollywood movies with the cheesy lovers, oh, I love you, that's not human beings. So whatever AI has been trained on, the essence of a human being, the nobility, the laughter, the love, the beauty, the mercy, the truth, it can never understand that because it has no being and it's not been trained on that. So again, we must be very careful. I was reading, I think Brian Romelli was publishing some data where he said the big chat GPT, the big models, 40% of their LLM training was on Reddit. You're going to base your life on that. Good luck with that. So there are areas, as you said, like healthcare, which could really help. But we also have human things we could do. Go back to the 1950s. If you were ill, they would treat you as a human being. They wouldn't just look at your symptoms. The doctor would actually touch you. They would ask you how you felt. They'd ask you what you did. They would know you because it'd be the same doctor who treated your parents. So they go, oh, I remember when your dad was 6. He did the same thing. He had an ingrown toenail. No worries. Because we had organized the data flows and the human relationship flows to optimize human life. And we've moved away from that. And now we're tinkering around the edges looking for applications. And it's great, but I think we're missing the point. I think we need to dream a better future. We need to think about how we restore that. And Val, you were right about saying it's a good time to be alive. I mean, for me, I love Cube because it brings people together. I love the EDA. And I think it's a technology which allows you to live a 1950s life. It does for me, because I just have to have my big 28-inch screens, and I can be anywhere, and I can be in multiple places at a time because I've got 3 or 4 computers connected, but I can be talking to people one place and working, going to another. So for me, I can then do that and go, right, it's 2:00, I'm going home, and I only live 10 minutes away, and I can go home, I can have the afternoon off. Yesterday, I was picking apples in the middle of the afternoon, then I came back. So my life is better because the technology enhances and empowers me personally, not the system, not the healthcare, but me as a human. So I put myself in the middle of the entrepreneurial, market-driven economy as it should be, with people serving each other, looking at my needs. And again, we just need to dream that and stop accepting the hype and just going with the stuff, because it's really hard to come up with anything. So I have a pet called 2020, which I use to get people to try and. So PET is people engagement tool. My new book, All Change, it's definitely in there. I think it's also in putting strategies to work, but I'm not sure, but you have to check that. So that whole process of dreaming, thinking about the people around you, what does it mean? And it's crucial you understand wealth, because Tim Smith, the guy who built the Eden Project, he has this quote where he says people always get confused about wealth because it's not just about the boring thing of cash, but it's the value which we have in other people. And again, we miss this. Look, the wealth which we're getting from each other just by interacting, it's not cash. We're growing, we're learning. Wealth is not the same as value. Value is how much you'd pay for that pen. Wealth is something else. Wealth is your ability to live a better life because you're being supported and buoyed up. Value is not the same as cash, because guess what? You can have something at a high price and there's no cash. But wealth is the important thing. Human beings are good at wealth if we can help them through technology. Computers, easy. They have one processor or many processors. You can plug them together. You can scale them up. They can store data. They go, when you want to upgrade them, you just change the software or the hardware, and they network. Human beings, try to get them to network. Everyone's ego gets in the way. Why? Because you need an ego. Why do you need an ego? Because you've got 2 processing units, left and right brain. One thing on your heart. The brain doesn't tell your heart to beat. It knows one in your stomach telling you how to digest. Vagus nerve between them. 4 processors or more. And then your ego pulls them all together, so you think, hey, I'm just one person. No, you're like 4 different computers running different programs. And the ego has the job of pulling it all together, making it work. And it says, because I'm worth it. So it always tells you lies about how wonderful you are. So when you bring 2 people together, the lies might bump into each other. Because one person who thinks, I'm worth it, I've got a great idea. The other one thinks the same thing. And then they can't network. But we've got 10 petabytes of data in our brains. The Greeks never wrote anything down. They just remembered it all. I recently started learning how to use a mind palace. And it's incredible when you start working on it. You can remember phone numbers. My goodness. So there are things about that. And then the culture, of course, is how we make sure that we net together and build on each other. What are we all aligned to do? Whether it's a strategy or team or your project, what are we aligned to? What's subordinate to that? And how are we going to work together? How are we going to share data? Who says what's good? How do we make sure the data is right and we're doing reviews? So for me, the future is the past, the joy of the past, the life of the past. But we choose what we will use, including AI, to enhance and empower us to live a better past. We don't get caught in the hype of AI and go digging for gold, trying all these things in the petri dish, whilst the people selling us the shovels get infinitely rich.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking about your analogy on value. I think if we went back to Dale's point around Primavera and whether that's improved projects in the decades that it's been around, I would probably say no, but then there's a bias to me, right? And I'm going to hurt my little planning friends, but I actually think value creation is way easier now. And I'm probably on the different spectrum. I probably see value creation, back to your point, Eddie, as a personal experience. I think a lot of people are too concerned with what's happening outside of their worlds. It's funny because there is a perspective, like if you're trying to solve big problems, don't focus on them. There's a challenge with society on focusing on problems that they can't control, outside of their control, but they won't tackle problems that are at their doorstep. their local neighborhood, their local community, their local state, which I think is an interesting concept. But whether or not AI has a role to play on this, and this is my last question, but it's a really interesting one because it's only just come out, and I see the pros and the cons of this, Eddie, and I think, Dale, I'd love to get your views on this. Has anyone heard what's going on in Albania at the moment with AI? So this might be a good one for Gen AI and you, Alan, and Greg, to talk about, Dale. Albania is the first in the world to basically elevate AI to a role in government.
I did see that.
Oh, yes, I heard about the votes. Yes.
Yeah, so the Albania Prime Minister Eddie Rama has promoted an AI chatbot to cabinet as Minister of State for Artificial Intelligence, and it's actually quite controversial. But if you don't read the hook line or the bait piece, it's actually interesting. So Albania was voted as one of the most corrupt countries in Europe, according to Transparency International, and that's why the president has said, "I would love to have someone to help me that had an independent view." Now, who's controlling the bot? I think there's a concern. I think there's a big concern there. But it says, he said, I would love to have a brilliant team, not only people, but AI, to come out with the first full AI model in public procurement. And so he wants it to manage all public procured projects as part of the government's way of combating transparency. Not transparency, but corruption within the government. Now, there's a pro and a con to this, and maybe I'll start with you, Dale, and then I'll go to you, Eddie, for final thoughts.
There's the cost to everything, right? There's always a cost. And I guess the cost has to be worth the gain that you're getting. And perhaps in the context of Albania, where there's a lot of corruption, something independent, if it is truly independent, like an AI chatbot, will help them. I think it's interesting because you think the constructs of a government, what does it serve to do? It serves to provide you with a consolidated view, I guess, of all the moving parts to ensure that, citizens are safe and everything works, right? And, public service, basically. And so you ask yourself then, is something like an AI able to do that? And you go, well, yeah, kind of, because it's a construct. Are you leading entire populations by going and, personally engaging with them? Probably not, although it feels like it through social media and television and radio and all these things. But actually you're not. So I don't know, it's a tough one to try and digest because it's a very big question, and there's a lot of different contexts within the world to try and condense it into an answer. But I think given the right context, it's a fantastic option, I guess, is the way I'd put it. But yeah, Eddie, what do you think?
Yeah, I go with that, and I like it as an idea, except, okay, so have you met people? You know how they are. So one of the big things in project management is there's a strapline which goes, I think it's data to decision, but they're going to use AI for one of these types, not generative, the other one. AI, you get the data and gives you a decision. And there's a big hype about that. And I heard it and I burst out laughing because I know I've met people, okay? So the reason people don't decide isn't because they haven't got the right data. That's not why they don't decide because of ego. Because some people are risk averse. Some people are risk loving and they fight each other. Some people don't want to be there when the decision's made. Some people want the decision which will help them, not what the data is saying. So yes, you can use the AI to propose the right decision. And then you have people, human beings. And when they line up is if they've got an alignment, a common goal, and they know how they're working together. So when you have an organization, tons of politics or project going off the rails, it's because there isn't alignment and they haven't figured out how they're working together. Okay. So if you've got a corrupt country, you probably are missing, let's get a common set of values, let's figure out how we work together, then we build the systems underneath it for, say, procurement. Now, I have a view of government which is probably different from yours, which is the less government, the happier I am. I mean, my general thing is if somebody says, should the government, I go, no. I don't think the government's job is to keep us safe. I think the government's job is to corral resources in order to protect the outside of the group of people who've decided to make that unit of cross-service within their particular set of values and way of working. That's all their job is. Everything else should go nowhere near them because it just burns everyone's lives. Look, you've got friends, you have Christmas, They give you gifts. Have you had that? You get 10 gifts from your friends and family who love you and know you. How many of those gifts are useful? 1, 2, 3? 3. So imagine you spent £100. That's £30 for £100 spent by people who know you and that actually like you and wanted you to get value. Okay? So imagine the government who doesn't know you, doesn't like you, has politicians who are climbing the greasy pole to match their manifestos, and the civil service who doesn't want to change their jobs are taking backhanders because they're corrupt. When you give them £100, how much do you think you'll get of the value of that? The entire government idea it's a dumb idea to let them do anything other than just make sure that the castle walls are in place so that we can trade in the castle. Nothing else should they do. Everything else should be local, community-based, and so on. But again, if you lose common goal for the community and how we work together, then people virtue signal. Look at me, I'm doing lots of climate. But actually, at the same time, I don't know, I'm chopping down the trees in my garden, etc. It's all nonsense. I mean, I've got my heated vest on because this room isn't heated. Because a couple of years ago, I basically said, if you want to solve climate change the way you heat people. Don't heat the air, heat the people. So I don't heat the building's cold. I'm wearing a heated jacket. Don't know, you see the battery in there, okay? I just went on and did it. I think to people, and they go, no, we've got to make sure we've got targets. All bullshit, so they can show off how wonderful and virtuous they are. Because there is no common way of viewing people, so they have to pretend that they're aligned, or they're heading towards whatever's the transcendent thing they're focusing on, and it's all a con. So I wish Albania the very best. I suspect that the Prime Minister will put this in place, and then people will get in the way. Is he going to use the chatbot himself? I don't know. Or is he going to get his assistant to use it? And the assistant, is it a cousin of the minister of whatever? You know what I mean. It's people. So I would rather, if you're serious, you focus on the values and trying to get that to work in order to shape the culture and the behaviors and then build the processes underneath it. But what do I know?
Well, I think you had some good points there, Eddie. And but by that definition, then, if we wanted smaller governments, would you consider then
no
hybrid?
I prefer administration. That's all. You're going. Would I?
Sure.
Am I what?
So then, could that not be run by AI?
It's the CEO question again, isn't it? It's that CEO question I said. Yes. If you put an AI in charge of protecting all the borders, making sure the people within whatever the castle is are going to not be attacked when the other lot come to try and steal. We talked about service and what happens when you don't serve each other. There's no trade and so on. Great. But don't forget, AI is not infallible. It hallucinates. It makes shit up. It would launch the nuclear weapons, etc. So I don't know. Maybe that's where it goes. Maybe we have just robot dogs everywhere. But how will they know not to bite us? I mean, I've coded all my life. I know the machinery, especially software, is full of errors. It always goes wrong. I've worked with machines, so yeah, I would, if I had that loop, I'd put a person in charge.
It's funny, right?
Get a person in charge to listen to all of them.
I usually have 2 or 3 whiskeys by the time we're talking about this stuff, but there is a contrast. So if you say, well, then, and the biggest thing I think with AI that people say why they don't use it, right? The opposite, or the resistance, is around trust, right? So let's say if you put together a bunch of tasks, as you said, the CEO question, and you had an AI over here and you had a person over here, who would make the most errors? And is that what we're looking for? And the question is, well, what if you had both? So we talked about a shadow AI organization that mimics your existing organization. And so for every Dale in the organization, there was a Dale there. For every Eddie, there was an Ed A in the organization, so that each level had its own counterpart to kind of support that. And then you had you could train that, right? But I think that the challenge in government, and back to your point, and I'm not a big fan of big government either. I'm a big fan of small government. I like self-governed communities.
I don't want government at all. I just want administration. Get rid of them.
If you just have administration, then
you think about it. The reason we have things like Parliament is because they have to go by horse from the end of the country to go to the centre every time they want to vote.
I'm too young for that, mate.
Representative, and they sent the representative. But you don't have to do that anymore. It's ridiculous. If there's something serious, we could actually have direct involvement if we need. Yes, carry on. Sorry.
No, I'm with you. I'm with you. I just think at some point it could it could be a feasible choice to pick an AI representative for an area or for a community to do the administration part rather than a person. If it was run by the community, I think there's something about ownership and control that needs to be
1950s.
owned.
That's the 1950s. Community, people know each other. The kids can go out playing all day because everybody knows everybody else. You don't have to carry your ID because guess what? They know who you are. Val, you know that? Oh, I know your mother. I was at school with her. You were a naughty boy. Those are the things we want. So coming back to the pairing things up, when they started using computers versus humans of playing chess, they got to a point where I think it was Deep Blue beat the human beings. And then they discovered that if you put a person with a computer, you could beat the computer. And they called them centaurs, this idea of having a human being enhanced and empowered by a machine. Great idea. So, but I wouldn't just have one AI because they lie and they make mistakes. I have 3 or 4, and then the human being has to think, which one should I listen to? If it's just one, then human beings being nice, normal, human, lazy people will just go, just let the AI do it. I'm going for a pint. I've met people. I am one.
Do you know what the great thing is that my favorite people are all humans?
That's for now, Dale. For now. You're not old enough yet.
Yeah. So, but no, in all seriousness, this is I love this conversation, Eddie. It's been amazing to have you back. But before we let you go, we have to have this huge announcement on this episode. We have Professor Eddie Obeng's All Change book, the Project Chatter podcast edition. So in the show notes, folks, we'll add the link there. If you've heard of Eddie before, you definitely need to get this book if you haven't got it yet. If you haven't, you still need to get this book after listening to this episode. Eddie packs all of his wisdom into this book, so please do go ahead and feast your eyes on it. But look, Eddie, it's been fantastic. Yeah, exactly. It's been fantastic to have you on, Eddie, with your charisma, your analogies. You bring it to life. I think you also give us perspective in this world where, yes, I think for me, a balanced view is there is a bit of hype. There is this AI trend. It is here to stay. It will make a difference. However, we need to use any technology, to your point, with reason and actually with a plan, rather than just necessarily creating stuff and seeing what happens. There's a time and place for that, to be creative. To Val's point, I think that's in the cool space. What could it potentially do? But the actual adoption and application of it to make a real difference needs to be considered. So that's my thoughts in terms of rounding things up. Any final thoughts from you, Eddie?
Yeah, I really want people to just take an afternoon and an evening off, just chill out and dream a better future. Look forward 10, 20, 30 years. Think about what's really going to be important, and then think about how you use your skills, your capabilities, your wealth in other people, the technologies available to create the life you actually want to live, rather than the one which momentum is taking you towards, which you probably hate.
Wow. Mic drop over there, folks. Val, any final thoughts from you?
It's good to see you, Eddie. It's been too far between catch-ups, so we've got to catch up a bit more. Hopefully I can come over and we can grab a beer or a whiskey together. And yeah, thanks for your input, mate. I love the perspective. It's really good.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me. It was great fun. Thanks.
It's been our privilege and our pleasure. Professor Eddie Obeng. There you have it, folks. This is the end of this episode. But remember, if you like what you've heard, please do help us and pay it forward. Share a link to this episode on your favorite social media. Once again, a massive thank you to our guest, Professor Eddie Obeng. And thank you all for listening. Till next time, we say stay safe, be disruptive, and have fun doing it. For myself and Val, it's bye for now.